Hello there everyone and welcome back to another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As usual, to my left is my co-host Mr. Felipe Amorim. Welcome back, sir. How's it going?
Yeah, man, all good.
Good. Yeah, we've had a little bit of a break. We've been frantically, I don't know if any of you saw on the social media, we were trying to get together to record some episodes and we had so much stuff, didn't we? Tube strikes, petrol prices increasing, gigs at short notice, gig cancellations, which mean we couldn't get together.
A tour.
In between all of that, a tour as well.
Yeah,
so yeah, we do apologise for missing out on an episode last week, but you know, like we said, we could have done it over Zoom, but it's just better when we're together. Exactly, yeah. So hopefully this makes up for what we missed last week, and I think it will, because we are talking about a band who, up until maybe 3 months ago, I knew of by name and by the hits, so to speak. But only until we actually decided to do them and talk about them sort of soon did I realise how good they were. And that was the ultimate power trio, rock's first ever supergroup, Cream. So, big, yeah. As most of you know, Cream consists of Eric Clapton, Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce, three incredible musicians for different reasons. Got together in 1966. But Felipe, you want to talk a bit about the stuff before Cream?
Well, yeah, the interesting thing about Cream was both Jack Bruce...
Hold on. We need to start the episode.
Oh, yes, we need to start.
And again, it's a coffee episode, not a beer episode. Hold on, you're going to burn your hands like that.
It's slightly less rock and roll than usual. So, here we go.
Da-da-da! The episode begins. Yay.
Yes. Coffee's ready.
Your cup's there, sir. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you, sir.
So yeah, we did make a little mistake, as we thought we cited that Emerson, Lake and Palmer were possibly rock's first supergroup. And when we say supergroup, we mean a group who has come together from members of other bands. So that they were not famous, but known beforehand. Emerson, Lake and Palmer will change our statement to them being prog's first supergroup.
Yeah.
But by definition, I think a lot of music historians and critics cite Cream as rock's first supergroup. And you want to talk a bit about
I think it's fair to say that, because most people don't know the bands they were playing with before, but as individual musicians, they were already regarded as some of the best in England.
Yes.
And, Ginger Baker and Jack Bruce played with Alexis Corner's Blues Incorporated, which was a really, really important band in the rock and blues scene in the UK. And also they've played with, what's the other one? Graham Bond?
The Graham Bond organisation, yeah.
So both those groups, they were experimenting with blues and a bit of jazz. So they were pretty much in charge of making that transition between those, classic approaches to blues and jazz to something that goes more towards rock and roll and more, experimental than the other bands.
Do you remember at university we had a history of popular music lecture, which I did speak about in a previous episode, where we learned about the background of certain music styles.
Shout out to Paul Scott.
Shout out to Paul Scott, our tutor. I don't know if he's listening, but I don't expect we're factually correct enough for him to listen. Paul was always a stickler for detail.
He would say that we're wrong about something.
Or he'd want us to cite our references if we said it. But Paul, awesome lessons. Thank you for the lessons. You've inspired us. You've literally inspired us to do this. So if you are listening, thank you. But Paul he talked in those lectures so much about Alexis Corner. Now, what Alexis Corner why he's so significant is because he was pivotal in bringing over American blues musicians to England.
Yeah.
That is huge, because what that started in England was what they called the British blues invasion, which is where you had people blues musicians coming over from America and not taking over the British blues scene, but moulding it in a different way.
Yeah.
And what you ended up having was Alexis Corner. What was his band called? Alexis Corner's
Blues Incorporated.
The Blues Incorporated. I think John Mayall was American as well, because John Mayall's Blues Breakers was a huge act, because that's who Eric Clapton started.
Exactly. Eric Clapton played with the Yardbirds, with Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. They didn't actually play the three of them together.
No, Jimmy Page and Beck were in together. Yeah. Clapton and Beck were together, but I don't think Clapton and Page were ever together.
Exactly. But they were all part of that band, and the Yardbirds, they kind of shaped the way those guys think about music and how to bring blues into a heavier approach. And that's what Jeff Beck did with his first solo album. That's what Jimmy Page did with Zeppelin, and obviously that's the direction Clapton was taking as well. That came from the Yardbirds, but also the Yardbirds, they ended up being more a pop band at some point, and Clapton was really unhappy with that.
That's why Clapton left, because he felt and he saw and heard the Yardbirds going in this poppy direction, and he said, "No, I want to go towards the blues." He said, "I love the blues." But just going back to Alexis Corner, we got to say, just give him a little shout out, because what he did changed British music, because he brought over the artists who were pioneering. I don't want to say blues altogether in America, but electric blues, let's call it that. He would bring these artists over and basically put on showcases for American blues artists to show the British, this is what we've been doing stateside. And then you got people like Clapton, Jimmy Page, Jeff Beck taking influence
and doing showcases. Their own version of it.
And then after that, doing their own version of it. You're right.
Isn't it because there's a cultural background difference as well? Because you can listen to what the Americans are doing, but you're not American. You're not. You have a different background altogether. So your vision of their music is going to be something different. So you're going to do your own thing. And I think that's what the British musicians were doing at the time, not trying necessarily to sound exactly like their influences, but to take it into another direction. And Clapton, rock and roll. That's what Clapton did with not only with Yardbirds, but with the John Mayall's Blues Breakers.
Yeah.
When he actually became famous as a soloist, as an instrumentalist, isn't it? When he was playing with John Mayall, everyone was talking about his guitar skills.
Yeah, exactly.
When he became God.
Yes, so they formed in 1966, and like we said, this is rock's first supergroup. So they're all playing with other different people. Where is it here? Clapton was playing with the Yardbirds and John Mayall's Blues Breakers. Ginger Baker was playing with the Graham Bond Organisation, and Jack Bruce was playing with Powerhouse and Manfred Mann. So they'd all come from these bands. Now, what was interesting is that the way that we just spoke about Clapton loving the blues side and really wanting to push the blues forward, Baker and Bruce were not blues musicians, were they? They were jazz musicians.
Yeah.
They could play the blues, but they were jazz musicians. And they were two of the most sought-after jazz session musicians in England at the time. And Clapton wanted them specifically in his band. This is a funny story of how they formed. Clapton approached Baker and said, I want to do this project. I want it as a trio. I want it to be blues-based, and I want us to try more stuff out, this, that, and the other. Baker was really happy to do this because he wasn't happy with how Graham Bond was abusing alcohol and drugs at the time. He wanted out of that. Clapton then said to Baker, we can do this project, but only if Jack Bruce is on bass. And what people don't know is that Jack Bruce and Ginger Baker worked together before. They didn't get on. For anyone who's followed our Today in Rock and Roll page on Instagram, I did a reel about this with a little fact. They hated each other. Cream was almost destined to fail from the start because in previous bands, I think they both played for the Graham Bond Organisation at one point, Baker and Bruce. They fought with each other. They sabotaged each other's instruments on stage. I don't know how. I'm thinking maybe cutting a drum skin or snapping some bass strings. So did I say, drum skin or bass strings?
Imagine that.
God. But that was the defining factor for Clapton. And I suppose in the end, we need to thank Clapton that he tried to make it work. Because
he insisted on it, right? Like, I want this specific lineup. Yeah. And imagine Jack Bruce was, in the end, he was the proper lead singer in the band, isn't it? Yeah. Clapton wasn't singing that many songs.
Yeah. And songwriter to an extent.
Yes, exactly. Lyricist. And it's like, you couldn't have Cream without him for sure.
Yeah.
And good on Clapton that he actually insisted on that, even knowing that those guys couldn't work together for too long. He probably knew the band would fall apart.
Yeah, they agreed to put aside their differences for this project because it was unique.
Yeah.
the stuff Clapton was showing to them and telling them that he wanted to do. They hadn't heard this stuff before, so they were interested. And I think the dynamic that we have here is very fascinating. 2 jazz musicians and 1 blues musician.
Yeah.
Now that is, although jazz is not organised, what I'm trying to get at is that jazz is unorganised.
That's a
jazz is organised compared to blues.
Strong statement. Jazz is not organised.
Jazz is no. I'm saying jazz is organised, and blues is unorganised. If you think in terms of jamming,
right? I get it. In jazz, you're saying that jazz, you've got.
What I'm saying is that in jazz, if you see for a jazz musician, we played in a jazz trio together. Structures are organised. It is 16 bars of this, followed by 16 bars of this, back to 16 bars. And if you see a chord in one of those bars, and it doesn't matter what chord, if you see a chord, in jazz, there are only a certain amount of notes you can play that reflect that chord. We're not going to get into this too far, but you have a chord. It's in jazz, it normally has 4 notes, root, third, fifth, and maybe a 7th. Those, plus a couple of others within a scale, are all you can play. Whereas blues,
if you want to follow the rules,
yeah. but that's you know what jazz people are like.
They follow.
Where blues, it's a bit more erratic and free. You can try other scales that may or may not work.
And it's usually not every time, but usually blues is simpler in terms of chord progressions.
Yes, which allows
less chords,
absolutely
shorter structures, and it does give you more freedom to
it gives
elaborate as a soloist instead of
try new things. Yeah. Because of what I said about that jazz chord, 4 notes. That's a very specific sound. If you play that chord in a piano, there are only a certain amount of notes that a trumpet, a guitar, a keyboard are going to be able to play over that without it sounding awful.
The notes that you would consider as wrong, they're more acceptable sometimes in a blues context.
Yes,
you can try a lot of stuff, and especially the British blues at the time, because you got some psychedelic elements as well.
Yeah,
and they were trying those things out. So they were not only doing blues jazz in a heavy way. They were try some sort of experimental psychedelic kind of hippie.
Yeah, exactly, because that was going around at the end of the 60s as well. I just mentioned that. We just did that little quick jazz detour because I thought it was fascinating with 2 jazz musicians and a blues guitarist trying to get together and saying, let's create something new. But to be honest, thank fuck they did, because Cream are incredible. Yeah. I've heard I've heard the hits for years, but it's only the last few weeks actually since we decided to do an episode that I really dug into their back catalogue, and they've got some great stuff. So let's start off with their 1966 album, the first one that was called Fresh Cream, which I love. That's just so clever. I mean, normally if you're going to try and put a pun into an album title, give it a few albums so that the fans and the media... They
start Fresh Cream by Cream.
At least if you give it a few albums or years, the fans and the media will say, okay, let's let these guys be serious, and then they can start joking. No. Cream were in straight away.
The beginning. Maybe they knew they wouldn't last.
They knew, yeah. Oh, maybe so, yeah. Actually, there's something I want to say, but it's a question in our segment. So I'm going to start a segment. This is the quiz. I've got 5 questions for Felipe. Now let's see. Play along at home, as usual. Put your answers in the comments and everything.
I just said fuck. Does that make the episode explicit?
I did it 30 seconds ago because I said thank fuck Cream
so
started.
It's explicit.
All of the episodes are explicit,
That's
just in
amazing.
case. Yeah. There's always a time where we go shit or something like that, and we never notice it when we're recording. And then when I go back and listen to it, Felipe's been like, and I listened to this, and holy shit, man, it was good. So there's always a swear word somewhere in our episode. Anyway, here's the quiz. Question 1. Who did the band jam with in London in October 1966?
Well, that's very specific. And I wasn't there, was I? October 66. Who did they jam with?
It was one of their first performances.
Wait a minute. Hendrix.
Yes. Well done. 1 out of 1. Question 2. On the album Goodbye, there is a songwriter credited as L'Angelo Misterioso. Do you know who that is?
If it's the song Badge, then would be George Harrison.
Correct.
Yes.
So George Harrison co-wrote the song Badge on Cream's last album, and they didn't put George Harrison on the notes. Know that. They put L'Angelo Misterioso, which I think means the mysterious angel, which I'm fine with George Harrison being called that. That's fine. Right, question 3. Baker and Bruce went on to form another trio called BBM with which famous rock guitarist?
Oh.
I'll help you out. BBM, Baker, Bruce, M.
Of course it's Baker and Bruce, right? It's not helping them that much.
Oh no, at least you know the guitarist's name begins with M. Or surname, I should say.
What's his name? Wait a minute. God, I knew that.
BBM.
BBM. Gary Moore.
Yeah, well done. Yes. Yeah, well done. Gary Moore of Thin Lizzy. 3 out of 3, man. Incredible. Question 4. Which famous album was recorded in Baker's newly built Nigerian studio in 1973?
Oh, I think I'll pass that one. 1973.
1973. A very famous album was recorded in Ginger Baker's newly built studio in Nigeria.
Wow, famous album by another British band.
Yes.
Jeez. Was it the Stones?
No, it wasn't.
Was it Zeppelin?
No Zeppelin, no.
No, pass.
No, okay. No. The album was Band on the Run.
Whoa, I would never have
Paul McCartney and Wings went to Nigeria. Yeah, they went to Nigeria to Baker's studio to record. I don't know if they were there on tour or something, but anyway.
I bet Ginger Baker said they were crap. Because everyone was crap for him.
Anyway, question 5. Why did they name themselves Cream?
Because they thought they were the cream of the musicians.
They were the cream of the crop, which is a saying. Is that a worldwide saying, or is it British?
It's worldwide. Yeah. So we wouldn't say. We could just say the cream, like in
Portuguese, and that would make sense. Yeah. Perfect. So they knew, Clapton knew that he was British blues's best guitarist, and Baker and Bruce knew that they were jazz's best rhythm section. So they thought we're the best, we're the cream of the crop.
That's it.
Cream. So again, the confidence to call your first album Fresh Cream and to call yourselves Cream because you knew you were the best 3 guys in the country. My God, the sheer arrogance. But it's deserved.
That means you know who you are, isn't it? That's exactly, why my next band is going to be called Shitty and the Shitters. That's very honest.
Stay tuned for when his band comes out. And the new album, Holy Shit.
Holy shit.
Anyway, well done, mate. That's 4 out of 5. Really good. Well done. And if you followed along, let us know in the comments and everything how you did. Excellent. So the first album, as we said, Fresh Cream, released in 1966. Interestingly, half of the tracks are blues covers. Or covers of what we call blues standards, so standard songs that most blues musicians should know. And the other half were originals written by Baker and Bruce. What are your thoughts on the first album?
I absolutely love the first song. So I Feel Free, the first song.
Yeah.
Because they start with vocal harmonies and humming, and it's just so... how can I put it? It's subtle, and it builds up. It's not like a punch in your face from the first song. It's much more psychedelic than bluesy or jazzy, and it just they take it from there and they build up, and it's got a really nice vibe to it. I think the whole first album has a vibe.
Yeah,
you feel like you're in the 60s. It does deliver that as well as Pink Floyd does with the Piper at the Gates of Dawn. I think it's the same sort of
very psychedelic vibe.
Yeah, it's not the same kind of music, but it does create that environment, and you feel surrounded by the psychedelic vibe throughout the whole album. That's how I feel about it.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the first album, what it did is it definitely introduced who Cream were to us, and I don't think it's any surprise when you listen to this and think, wow, this is just a blues album.
Yeah. Maybe
with some heavier elements, with some rockier stuff, but it's just the blues music with electric guitars and distorted. And I think it's a very, very, very good album, and one that needed to happen for them, because when you come in with a new kind of music that they were eventually going to deliver in their next 2 albums, you've got to sort of set a marker and say, this is where we've come from, and this is Cream as we know it now.
And I believe the first song is really important.
Yes, the first song, the first album. I think interestingly, what you said about that is that it's got that. It's got a kind of almost a doo-wop feel about it, you know, with the do-do-do, and very lovely.
Here's the thing: when they start with that kind of humming and harmonizing at the beginning, you have no idea where they're going to take you to.
No, exactly, yeah.
Because all the things we're talking about, all the bluesy, jazzy elements and the distorted guitars and the experimentation, all that stuff we're talking about, you can't guess from the beginning. Whilst when you listen to the Beatles' first album or Zeppelin's, like the very first song, the very first chords, you know where they're going to take you.
Yes, yeah. They're making
a clear statement. This is what we're doing for the whole album. With Cream was a lot more subtle, and I like that.
Exactly. Did you know Toad is the earliest example of a drum solo in rock music?
Yeah, and it's the template for drum solos.
Do you want to talk about that for a bit as a drummer?
Talking about drums, yes.
So Felipe's going to talk to us about Toad.
Felipe likes the drums.
Yeah, and as usual, any song we mention is going straight into the playlist that's attached to this episode, so feel free to listen to this playlist along with the podcast or afterwards or before, whatever suits your needs, the songs will be in there. Tell us about Toad.
Right, Toad is like, as I said, is a template for drum solos in rock context. Because when you listen to let's put it like that, before rock drummers, drum soloing belonged to jazz music. You know, you don't see the blues drummers soloing very often. So you see jazz drummers soloing maybe once per set or something. And again, you have that formula and you have the structure. You have, let's say, the 32 bars AABA form, and the drummer's going to solo over that form. Even if the whole band stops playing, 9 out of 10 jazz solos are based on that form, and they're going to be playing over that form and going back to the music. So, like,
for anyone who wants to know, just quickly, AABA form in jazz is 32 bars, 8 of section A, repeating section A another 8 bars, different section B of 8 bars, and back to section A. So 8, 16, 24, 32. I think it's important. It's nice to, just anyone who wants to know what a jazz AABA form is, there you go.
Check it out. Yeah. But basically, so you have that, that kind of formula for soloing. And Toad is just like, okay, we're going to play a riff. The band's going to jam together over that riff. And then we stop altogether. And the drummer goes nuts. And then we come back to the riff and end the song, right?
Yeah.
So that's what happened with Moby Dick. So when Zeppelin came with that, and that's probably the most famous drum solo ever. But the formula wasn't created by them. Okay. It was taken from Cream's Toad, for sure. You know what I mean? I didn't do a research on that.
But it's
just obvious.
You know your stuff. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
there, you know what I mean? So I think, the interesting point with that is like, okay, give the drummer some, but for real.
Yeah. That's
just you play whatever. And he managed to squeeze into that solo every single one of his influences. He plays on the toms as he's doing like African percussion, and you can hear that.
Okay.
It sounds like percussion, it sounds like tribal music. And then he plays the snare as Louis Bellson or Gene Krupa or Buddy Rich or Art Blakey. He brings the jazz elements into it. There's one section of the solo, he's just playing the right cymbal as a jazz drummer would do as well. So you got all those elements of early jazz drumming, but with African percussion and just like experimenting around all of that. And there is a story being told by the drums. On the other hand, it's free. It's not like, I need to stay on this path.
Yeah, 3 bars left, none of that stuff.
He could go nuts, and that's really cool. And
fascinating, though, that we're talking, I think Cream, historically and critically, you look at them and you think, okay, well, they did so much for the progression, as we've mentioned before, of American blues coming to Britain and shaping British blues rock. And then the rest is history. But I don't think people consider enough what, for example, they have done for jazz to an extent. I'm not saying that what they did in Toad is... I'm not saying what they did in Toad is revolutionary and it changed jazz music. That's not true. But you got a jazz musician applying what he knows and his influences about jazz into another genre.
Yeah.
2 other genres, blues and blues rock.
Yeah. If you're doing that, that means, you are kind of giving all the other musicians of all other styles a chance to copy you. Like, let's put it like that. Yeah. So look what I'm doing here. You can go nuts as well if you want, because I did it. I did it before. Yeah. I'm the one to blame. But yeah.
And if anyone gets to say to modern musicians, you can do what you want, Ginger Baker's the boss.
Yes. Also, I recommend a documentary. I think it's called Beware of Mr. Baker.
Beware of Mr. Baker. Okay, we'll put a link if it's on YouTube or something. We'll stick a link in the show notes.
Just check it out. I'm not going to say anything.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, so he was probably, for most people at the time, the first drummer who was kind of the star of the band. Really.
Yeah.
To the same extent as everyone else in the band. It's not like, first of all, you have 2 singers, right? That's interesting. Both Clapton and Jack Bruce were singing, although I think Jack Bruce was singing more.
Baker sung a lot as well, just so you know, because I didn't realise until I did a bit of research.
But you see those 2 guys as frontmen, right?
Yes, agreed.
Singing and playing guitars, right? Guitar and bass. But you have a drummer who's like soloing and overplaying, and is loud and flashy. So there's no way you're not going to notice him. So he was a star in the band as well, not only a timekeeper.
Yeah. But each member became a star in their own way for their own instruments. But that's as their sound developed. But Fresh Cream got to number 6 in the UK charts, which I think is you could have guessed that because you've got these British musicians doing their thing. Only got to number 39 in the US though, which is interesting because in 1967. They released their second album, which was called Disraeli Gears. Now, Disraeli Gears got to the top 5 in the UK and the US. Now, it's interesting. It's important to note that between the release of Fresh Cream and Disraeli Gears, there was a US tour. And they went to the US and they showed their music. And obviously, it was taken very well. Why wouldn't it be? You've got the influences of American jazz in Ginger and Jack's playing, and you've got the influences of American blues in Clapton's playing, formed and moulded into this new British blues rock. So the Americans must have loved it because the next album came out and went straight to the top 5.
And you got to consider the same way they couldn't play the blues like the Americans, and then the Americans were kind of amazed by the fact that no one could play the British blues like the British, of course. So that's the cultural background I was talking about. You come from a different place in life, that's going to be reflected on your music. There's no way to escape that. And I imagine for someone in another continent, especially before Google and YouTube and all this stuff, to hear that kind of music and think, wow, this relates to what we do here. But it's so different. Yeah.
Just hearing the influences must be really nice. So that was released in November 1967, so 11 months after the release of Fresh Cream. Some important things about this album is that when I heard it, it still had the same bass, B-A-S-E, in the blues, but their sound was changing. It wasn't hard blues with electric guitars or with distorted guitars. It was hard blues with now more of a psychedelic influence.
Yeah, it's even more psychedelic.
It is more. And if another thing to point towards this is go and look at the album cover for Disraeli Gears, because it is so psychedelic. And it was so unusual for the time. Don't forget, you got Hendrix with Are You Experienced and Axis Bold as Love. Check out those album covers because they're very psychedelic and trippy and very hippie-esque, and Cream followed suit with the cover of Disraeli Gears. So it seems like quite a lot of this album was, I'm not going to say based around the psychedelic thing, but taking influence from the psychedelic movement, the psychedelic rock movement that was happening in and around the UK at that time.
Yeah, you can clearly hear that in the album. It's there on the first album, but more evident on the second one. And maybe that's the reason why it sold more, because it really took them to a different level.
I think so, yeah. I mean, you got that song, The Tales of Brave Ulysses, which is very psychedelic out of all of them. But again, like I said, I think Disraeli Gears, they find their sound. You've got Strange Brew is the song on there, and Sunshine of Your Love, which is arguably, well, no, it probably is, Cream's most famous song. Now, that is an interesting song because it has the psychedelic element there. It has the rock element there. But the main riff, do 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 do, that's based around the minor blues scale. So it's called a minor pentatonic, or you could call it the minor blues. And it's got the characteristics of what blues musicians would be playing during solos.
Yeah.
They based the riff around that, stuck a distorted guitar on it, made it a bit psychedelic, and you've got Sunshine of Your Love, which is just a phenomenal song. Do you like that song?
I love that song, and it's got like very distinctive sections. Like when it changes to the second part of the song, is a completely different song.
Yes. Do you mean the I've Been Waiting?
Yes. Yeah. It's like, what is it? The same song, really? And then it goes back to the distorted guitars and gets, louder
you're right.
heavier.
It takes you to another level for a second, doesn't it?
Bam, bam, bam. It goes into that riff for the second part.
Good
like,
point, man.
Well, you wouldn't. First time I've heard that, so I was like, "What's going on here? Where are they going with this?" Because it's like it doesn't seem to relate to the first part.
Yeah.
And because it's slightly bluesy at the beginning, you think it's going to be somehow predictable.
Yeah.
And it's not. They're definitely not predictable in any sense. That's what I like about them.
I agree. Excellent. Well, after Disraeli Gears, we have the Wheels of Fire album.
The best-selling.
Yes, and my favourite too. This, for me, is the Cream signature sound. I feel Cream, for this album, have arrived at where they wanted to. It has the hard rock. It has the blues. It has the psychedelia. But it's not like any one of those three aspects comes through more than the others. It is the perfect balance, I feel, between all of those. That is the Cream sound for me.
Isn't it White Room the perfect definition of what you just said?
Yeah,
it is. Balance? Because imagine if that song started straight with the vocals, right? That could be a pop or rock song.
Yes.
From that point, if you start from that point and you stick to that kind of stuff, is a solid groove, a strong vocal line, and it starts from the chorus pretty much, isn't it?
Yeah.
Kind of really strong. So if you just do that part, then that's a more predictable thing, and it's more commercial, I would say. Yeah. But they start with a 5/4 bar.
So this is something I've got in my notes.
1, 2, 3, 4, counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So I've got my notes. Odd time signatures for this album. That's the psychedelic element. That's the proggy psychedelic side of it that they were incorporating.
Because I think the comfort zone for rock and roll is 4/4.
Yes,
1, 2, 3, 4 all the way, and they went to 5 for the intro. And Ginger Baker is doing that kind of percussion vibe because it's playing the toms, the low toms instead of snares and cymbals and stuff. So the intro sounds a bit dark and a bit tribal, and it's a weird time signature for rock music.
It is, yeah. So for those who aren't sure or what we're talking about, when you count a song, songs are in time signatures, which normally in Western music is 4/4. You put 4 beats in a bar. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. It's familiar. It's even. There's a nice sort of grouping between it. They start the song in 5/4. So go and listen to White Room, and you'll hear bam da da da. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Da 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 da.
There you go. That's what it is. So
it's an uneasy time signature because you've heard your 4, you're satisfied, you're waiting for the next one, but the fifth one comes.
Yeah, it feels like it's slightly longer than it should be if you're used to counting in 4. And also, it creates that tension, isn't it?
Yeah,
the way they play that intro, there's not, the chord lasts for a bit longer than you would expect, and the drums are kind of dark and tribal again.
For an example of a song in 5/4 the whole way through, there is a song from the musical Jesus Christ Superstar that I'm going to put in the playlist just for reference, just so you hear how how a pop song could be written in 5/4. But yeah, Wheels of Fire. I mean, I love this album. It's recorded over a series of sessions before June '68, but also there's a few live tracks on the album, which are they play it towards the end, or they put it towards the end of the album.
Crossroads is on this album.
Yes, so that's another Cream classic, even though it's not theirs. It's one that they made their own.
Johnson's, isn't it?
That's right. Wheels of Fire sort of signified the end of Cream.
So that's when they actually decided to end the band.
Yes,
that album.
That's it. So it could even have been before. Let me just see my notes.
According to my notes, it was in late 1968 they decided to disband.
Yeah. No, you're right. Yeah, because I've got it here. And
so I got notes today.
You're right. He's on it. I'm the one who, Laz, come on. But you're right. May 1968. Yeah, you're right. Announcing. So what they would do is towards the end of this band, they decided that they were actually going to go out for one last hurrah. They were going to go and do a 22-day US tour and only two shows in the UK. Poor UK. Eh? Yeah. The US get 22 shows and the UK get 2.
It's just an island, isn't it?
It's just an island,
just travel to the city and watch the gig, go back home. Don't moan about it.
It's small anyway, isn't it? Let's talk about the reasons Cream broke up. What are your thoughts and what do you know to that extent?
I was talking about how unpredictable the music was, but how predictable their behavior was. And as we said at the beginning, the reason for the end is it was kind of it was the reason why they didn't want to get together at the first place, pretty much.
Yeah.
Clapton had to convince them to be together, right? So
they tried to make it work. Yeah.
Baker and Bruce couldn't get along. It wouldn't work.
Right.
And that's it. So too much animosity between the two of them to the point they couldn't. The thing about being a musician, especially touring, is you obviously is going to spend a lot more time hanging out with people than actually playing with them.
Yeah.
So it doesn't really matter how brilliant the music is if you're going to spend the rest of your day with someone that you don't like.
Yeah.
So obviously that wouldn't work. And probably Clapton knew that, and they knew that as well. But yeah, it was so the conflict between Baker and Bruce was
too much.
The reason.
Actually, it all kind of came to fruition when they were doing their jams, because for those who don't know, Cream wrote their songs by jamming in a room together, playing riffs off each other, solo, normal jams. Improvising, soloing, making stuff up and all that stuff. It got too loud. Cream were notorious for playing their jams too loud, which means it's time for a new segment. Well, not a new segment, a new installment of a new segment. How rock and roll is that? So in this segment, we are asking how rock and roll is that about specific situations or stories that we've heard from these rock bands from around the globe. Today, we are asking how rock and roll is jamming and writing songs as a band in a room together at such high volumes that it has permanently affected Ginger Baker's hearing. On the scale of 0 to 100, how rock and roll is it that you've lost your hearing because you wrote some of the most iconic blues rock songs?
Improvising as
well, yeah.
Which is like proper musical freedom.
It's not only writing and structuring, but improvising. How rock and roll is that, Felipe?
It's tough, man. Does it get any more rock and roll than that?
Well, we gave Deep Purple 95 for writing Highway Star on the way to a gig and perfecting it when they sound checked it. So where would you put this?
For the loudness, I'll give 97 for that.
97, there we go. That's the score. So 97. You lose
your hearing jamming with your band because you're way too loud. And nowadays people write songs on a computer, right? Even rock bands do that a lot.
Yeah.
You do pre-production without meeting your bandmates, and you don't jam together. For most of the bands, and the essence of that sort of rock and roll from the 60s and 70s was people jamming and creating on the spot together. So if you're creating, if you're jamming, you're going to be using someone else's ideas immediately. Someone plays a note, you follow that note, or you try to lead them somewhere else.
Yeah.
It's different than playing by yourself at home. So that is, for me, the essence of a rock band, is to be able to do everything with improvisation. The creative process is not one guy doing stuff as a band. So you're jamming and you're too loud.
Yeah.
That's rock and roll. We'll give them a nice
Ginger Baker says, it damaged my hearing permanently, and today I've still got a hearing problem because of the sheer volume throughout the last year of Cream. Now, something else...
Did you say that?
He said that. No, I don't know when he said that, actually. But he was talking about 68, the last year of Cream. Now, something else I read that was hilarious is that the quality and differences of guitar amplifiers changed so much from 65 through to 69. So every year, Clapton and Bruce were getting these new amplifiers that were bigger, better, and louder. And Ginger Baker couldn't compete with them. So Clapton's getting these new amps coming through the door, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's louder than the last one."
Spinal Tap, isn't it?
This goes to 11.
Just to quote Spinal Tap again, good rock and roll should hurt.
Good rock and roll should hurt. It should change your life, but
not necessarily for the better.
Ginger Baker is the living embodiment of that quote.
Exactly.
And
the band changed his life.
Not necessarily for the better. And we got our episode-ly Spinal Tap quote in, so well done. Another thing that really sort of annoyed Cream was the touring. Jack Bruce said, travel can kill a group, which and it just goes back to what you were saying. You've got to spend time with these people. You've got to have an understanding. If anyone saw our Tour Diary series thing about top touring tips from me and Felipe, you've got to be comfortable. You've got to have what you need around you so that when you're on the road, when you're on the bus, when you're in the van with the same 3 or 4 guys for a month, you've got to have your own space. Even if it's just in here, you've got to be mentally ready to not have your own space for a month.
Yeah, and those guys, I mean, if you have big egos like that in a band, but they call themselves the Cream.
Well, here's an interesting quote from Clapton. We've obviously spoken before about the talent of these 3 guys and what they did for themselves in their own little groups before forming Cream. Clapton said that Cream's later gigs consisted mainly of its members showing off. Which I think it's an interesting quote, because if you ever look at their live performances, they're a very busy band. For just 3 people, they're a very busy band.
It's too many notes sometimes, isn't it?
Too many notes sometimes. And Clapton was saying that's how it ended.
Yeah, and if you think you can do that, like for 3 albums, and you know what? Thanks fuck they didn't carry on doing that.
Yeah.
Because they have such a perfect
balance.
Yeah, and a great discography. Everything they release is good.
Yeah.
So they split up before it turned to shit.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. And again, we spoke out about this with Creedence, do you remember?
Yeah.
Episode 4, where we said, thank God they stopped then, because we remember Creedence and Cream for what they've done. If they'd have done 6 more albums that were awful after, then the memory wouldn't be so good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so after that, their final show, the final show for a while was November 1968 at the Royal Albert Hall in London. And it was recorded and released as Cream's farewell concert, but it hasn't gone down in history because they played very badly. They were just so fed up of being with each other and playing the songs. And yeah, they've even said, Ginger Baker said, it wasn't a good gig. Cream were better than that. We knew it was all over. We knew we were just finishing it off, getting it over with. So very sad to hear that. And I think had the same way, again, going back to Creedence ended at a certain point and they never played together again. Had Cream ended there, I think that would be a sad moment in rock history. But they've played together a few more times since then, and the relationships have been amicable. It's been pleasant. They played together in 1993, when they were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. They just did 3 songs, and they rehearsed the day before. That's a little one-off, I wouldn't. Yeah. But
it's not a proper gig.
No. What matters most though is at Clapton's request, they did 4 shows at the Royal Albert Hall in London in 2005. That was the proper farewell shows. Talk to us a bit about them.
Yeah, so I've watched the DVD when it came out.
Fascinating, isn't it? Amazing.
It is amazing. And there's an interesting thing there. It's like, well, you've got those guys now recorded with better equipment, right?
Yeah.
And, loads of cameras behind the drum kit, all the stuff you couldn't get back in the day. And I think it's just what they deserved as a proper farewell album or show.
Yeah.
They deserved to be remembered as that. Obviously, they don't have the youth. They don't have the same energy as when they were young, but they're playing well enough.
They are.
It's just it sounds as clean as it should be, and as noisy as it should be, is all there. It's balanced.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that gig.
They actually then planned a few months later to do 3 shows at Madison Square Garden in October. Actually, they didn't plan it, they did it. And unfortunately, they were not as good. They had a lack of rehearsals, and Baker and Bruce got into arguments again before those shows. It's like, come on, guys, 3 more shows. Just
you're still fighting.
Fuck's sake, just stay. It's just 3 more shows. Yeah, exactly. One thing we haven't actually mentioned is it's a weird thing to consider an album, but in 1969 they did release the album Goodbye. It was an album released to mark the end of Cream. 3 live tracks recorded in 1968, and 3 other tracks, including George Harrison's Badge, along with that as an album. Is it really an album? Is it really a Cream album? I think when you say to people Cream albums, you think of the first 3. I don't think you think of Goodbye too much.
Though. That's a good song.
Badge is brilliant, yeah. But anyway, that brings us to the end of Cream's history, really. I think we've got a lot of pleasant stuff in there. The music, the sound and the innovations they were bringing to blues rock. And unfortunately, again, just like with Creedence, the relationships within the band sort of marred what the band could have been. But at the same time, like you said, maybe it's good we didn't get any more Cream albums.
Exactly. And it's good that they got together for that one final live recording, because now Clapton's the only surviving member of the band, and at least the other 2 did that with him. Before
here's an interesting quote to sort of finalise this. From Clapton: "The thing about that band, Cream, was that it was all to do with its limits. It was an experiment."
Yeah.
So from the very start, you knew the limits. Clapton knew the tension between Baker and Bruce. He knew that they couldn't go on jamming and writing songs at that volume for, years and years. It would be too damaging. But that's it. It was an experiment. It was an experiment that succeeded and failed, but the success matters more, I think.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Shall we end with a segment?
We will. We're going to end with a segment, and we're going to do our top 5 Cream songs. So these will all be in the playlist. But here are Laz and Felipe's top 5. So to kick us off, we'll do the 5-5-4-4 thing. Yeah?
All right. Let's see how it goes.
My 5th favourite Cream song, "Sunshine of Your Love." Iconic riff, heavy distorted guitar, introducing blues psychedelic rock to the world.
My number 5, Toad.
Toad, brilliant, yeah, of course.
Drum solo,
Of course.
Yeah.
My 4th favourite song is "Sitting on Top of the World." Love it, very bluesy. That lazy shuffle to it is just fantastic.
I kid you not. You can read it here. My number 4, "Sitting on the Top of the World."
Brilliant. Well, then, do you want to add anything about "Sitting on Top of the World"? Or I
just love the lazy approach.
That's what it's just so lazy. That's the best way you can describe it. My 3rd favourite Cream song is a song called "Dreaming," which is off of the first album, and it's a very, the one.
Oh, it's a 6/8, Dreaming
kind of about my love. It's lovely. It's so unusual. It stands out on the album. Your number 3, sir?
White Room. For all the reasons we've mentioned before.
Yeah, excellent. My 2nd favourite Cream song, "Politician."
I don't know that one. I don't remember that one.
Oh, you don't?
I don't remember.
Oh, right.
I've listened to all the albums.
We're going to do a segment when he gets time. Felipe's going to react to "Politician." Okay. And that'll be a video coming out in the next few weeks, all right?
"Politician," the song, not "A Politician," because I don't want to react to that.
I won't make you listen to Boris. Yeah, the song "Politician." Dissonant, dark, heavy, but a blues song.
Wow.
About politicians.
I want to
the first lyric, "Enough, baby, get into my big black car." Wow. That's how the song starts. You're going to love it. Your 2nd favourite song, sir?
"I Feel Free."
Oh,
first song, first album.
Beautiful.
Psychedelic.
I feel free. Yeah, it is. Because it could be a hippie tune. If you listen to it out of context and not within the album, it could be a song
before the instruments kind of come together in that song.
Yeah.
Before the band sounds like a band, when it's just the vocals and stuff, it's just so beautiful and clean and perfect.
Lovely.
Again, you don't know where they're going to take you. That's what I like about them.
My favourite Cream song, he's already mentioned it, "White Room." For me, it's the epitome of Cream. I love that they used it on the end of that movie Joker. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know what much more to say. Go and listen to that song. I absolutely love it. Your favourite Cream song?
That's an unusual one. Strange Brew.
Oh, yeah.
I'll tell you why.
It's got an energy to it, hasn't it?
I'll tell you why. Because we tend to see Cream as a band of great instrumentalists. So you sometimes forget about how good the songwriting is. When you strip a song down to acoustic guitar and vocals, you can actually tell if the melody and the lyrics are good enough to tell the story without great musicians playing them. And a friend of mine, I have to mention his name, Marcus Marangon. So shout out to my friend Marcus. He used to play this song on his acoustic guitar. Like, he used to loop the song for hours.
Really?
He loved the song and he was playing it. And I was listening to that song. I was like, wow, isn't it so beautiful? Just the melody and the lyrics with just an acoustic guitar. And you don't even think that's a Cream song because there's no drum fills, no bass. If you just listen to the melody, it's still a perfect song to me. So that's why I have this kind of emotional memory of this song.
That's a lovely description,
played acoustically, but...
Lovely description.
What a song. Yeah. Strange Brew. Totally recommend.
There you go. So listen to all of those. I know we've got a couple that are the same, but they'll all be in the playlist. And I think that's a good place to end the episode. Any final things you want to say about Cream?
Loud.
That's what they want to hear. That's what Cream wanted to hear from fans. Yeah,
they're going to be remembered as loud, which is cool. Yeah.
I think that Cream have such an important historic place in music because it kick-started... It kick-started the idea in Britain that you can really take another idea and roll with it in terms of this blues stuff. We know that Clapton did his stuff with John Mayall and Alexis Corner and everything, but Cream was when he did his own ideas and took them into a hard rock sense, a psychedelic rock sense. Even we were saying the start of I Feel Free and Dreaming, that's like doo-wop with blues influence.
Yeah.
He took his idea of what he wanted blues to be for him.
Yeah. And
took it to levels that I don't think anyone could have predicted.
So they came about, they've changed the history of a whole genre and they disappeared.
Yeah.
Beautifully.
I don't know if they changed the history so much as created a new genre.
Yeah.
I think they created British blues rock.
There you go.
I think that's a fair thing, unless, I'll do some... I don't want to be sued. I don't want to be sued by a band who say, no, we were the first one. Well, but it was a statement. Cream made a statement with their music, with their album, and even with their egos. And I'm so glad that we got them.
And they were short and sharp. They came...
Got to the point. It was an experiment. It was an experiment.
They came, they delivered the message, and they disappeared in a couple of years.
They came, they jammed, and they conquered.
And they were loud.
And they were loud, yeah. So, anyway, I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you again, guys, for joining us for another episode of the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. As per usual, we are on all the social medias, on Instagram and Twitter. We are... Twitter. On Instagram, and that's the posh version. Twitter, we are at Long Live RNR Pod. And on Facebook and YouTube, you can just search the Long Live Rock and Roll podcast. We cut and put all of the episodes and segments onto our YouTube now, so go there if you prefer a visual experience compared to an oral one. But
can I just say, find us on the internet. Sounds so much cooler.
Find
we
us
are
on
the internet. You know the internet, that thing.
Google Long Live Rock and Roll podcast, and you'll find the way.
Go on the internet.
Anyway,
find us.
Thank you. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for joining us, guys. Final words.
Keep on rocking, everyone.
And as usual, long live rock and roll.